Bienvenidos a todos. Les agradecemos tanto que han elegido pasar unas horas especiales con nosotros esta noche. Pero primero estamos llenitos. Por favor, muévense cerca y para el frente, cerquita. Muévense si no dejen ningún asiento para allá. We're very full. Well, we're approaching very full. So please move in and forward if you can so that you're sitting close to your neighbors, but hopefully not on their laps. So welcome to On the Flip. My name is Anastasia Ordonez of Good Talk Media. You'll be hearing from my good friends and partners, Melissa Giroux and Andrew Grant Thomas of Embrace Race, very shortly. We're so grateful that you've chosen to spend a few special hours with us tonight. And tonight is very special. We and our storytellers worked hard over the past few months with a simple intention to tell a richer set of stories about race, ethnicity, immigration, and identity than we typically hear. And in doing that, we wanted to draw on some of the remarkable diversity of identity and experience that's right here in this community to help build our community. We hope this effort and future events make a meaningful contribution to the deep tradition of storytelling in the Valley. La idea para este evento empezó con el propósito de cambiar las narrativas dominantes que tenemos en esta sociedad. Caminamos por esta vida con etiquetas y muchas de estas son dañinas. Nosotros trabajamos bien duro durante varios meses con una sola intención: contar nuestras historias de raza, etnicidad, inmigración y identidad con una riqueza que no se encuentra fácilmente. Decidimos usar la diversidad de identidad y experiencia en esta comunidad para amplificarla. Esperamos que estos esfuerzos y demás en el futuro contribuirán a una tradición rica de contar historias aquí en el Valle. Esta noche vamos a oír 8 historias personales y poderosas. Esas personas determinaron cómo representar quiénes son. Nosotros le agradecimos el permiso que nos dieron para acompañarlos en este viaje. Tonight we will hear 8 personal, powerful stories. These people determined how they wanted to represent who they are, and we're so grateful to them for the permission they gave us to accompany them on this journey. Pero antes de oírlos, unos anuncios y agradecimientos, a few announcements and acknowledgments. A special thank you to Vanessa Cerrillo. I don't know if she's in the room. There she is. Vanessa Cerrillo and Caitlin Holloway of Valley Voices Story Slam for their advice, support, and good cheer from the first moment we told them about this project. Muchas gracias a Vanessa Cerrillo y Caitlin Holloway de Valley Voices Story Slam por todo su apoyo y buen humor durante este proyecto. Can you please stand? You just be recognized. Also, a big thank you to Amherst Media for their video support and tech, and to Big Y for their help providing a few nibbles at the end of the show. Gracias a Amherst Media por su apoyo tecnológico y el supermercado Big Y. Many thanks also to the Eric Carle Museum staff for their support and helping us with this beautiful space, and for their patience with us. Gracias a los empleados de Eric Carle. Y un tremendo aplauso a nuestros voluntarios de Paula Lima Jones, Laura Sampath y Emily Howard, quienes ayudaron con la registración. A hearty thanks to our registration volunteers who are actually still outside, but I'm sure they're here in spirit. So let's write a round of applause. También quiero darle las gracias a nuestros oficiales electos que están aquí. Special acknowledgement to our elected officials that are here tonight. State Representative Mindy Dom, is she here? Was she able to make it tonight? Maybe not. Okay, she might not be here yet. Amherst Town Manager Paul Bockelman. Paul, there you are. Please take a stand, Paul. Amherst Town Councilor Shalini Ball Milne. Yeah. Shutesbury School Committee member Steve Sullivan. Is he here? Nope, not yet. Okay. Thank you to all of you for taking time to come with us and spend some time with us tonight. We really appreciate it. And last but not least, a really big thank you to our storytelling coach, Sue Schmidt. We so appreciate her working with all of us to bring the best version of these stories to you tonight. Sue, are you behind here? You'll see her a little bit later too. So a reminder that half of the proceeds from tonight's event will benefit the Franklin County People's Fund, which provides financial assistance for immigrants in crisis. Un recuerdo que la mitad de las ganancias esta noche serán para el beneficio del Fondo del Pueblo de Franklin County, que apoya a los migrantes en crisis. If you have not yet donated but would like to, or would like to make an additional donation, please come see us after the event. We're wearing stickers, that's how you know who we are. Los baños están afuera de este salón al cruzar el pasillo a la derecha. Restrooms are across the hall to the right when you exit these doors. And now for the good stuff. You'll hear 2 sets of stories tonight, broken up by an intermission. Each set will have 4 stories. Our storytellers for this first segment are Min Lee, Romina Pacheco and her daughter Asha, Farah Amin, and Romeo Romero. Tendremos 2 conjuntos historias con un intermedio a las 6:45. Cada conjunto tendrá 4 historias. Nuestros narradores para el primer conjunto serán Min Lee, Romina Pacheco y su hija Asha, Farah Amin y Romeo Romero. Queremos que disfruten bien de estas historias. Por favor, no usen sus teléfonos o cualquier otro aparato para filmar o grabar los cuentos. We ask that you be fully present with us to share in this event as we honor the stories and their tellers. Please don't use your phones or any other device to film or record these stories in any way. A video of tonight's stories will be made available thanks to Amherst Media. You will see a couple of volunteers near the front over here taking photos of our storytellers tonight, and those will also be made available later. And if you'd like to take a photo, please wait until the end of the story. There will also be an opportunity at the end of the evening to take photos of the group. So please join me now in taking out your phone, if you have one, finding the flashlight, and filling the room with light and love. That's beautiful. Then let's turn off our ringers, silence the outside world, and welcome our first storyteller.
For 15 years, I lived a double life. You see, growing up in my immigrant family, the rules were simple. No dating, no friends, and no fun. Schoolwork is your girlfriend until you're done with your MD, PhD, or PharmD. Only after you're done with all of your education and are gainfully employed will the elders in the community consult and make a suggestion for an appropriate Vietnamese spouse. I watched as a kid all of my older cousins follow this very strictly prescribed path. Doctor, engineer, pharmacist, engineer, pharmacist. You get a wife, you get a husband, and you get to live happily ever after. But here's the thing. As I grew up, I realized that I liked the idea of dating, friends, and fun. So I did what a lot of kids do. I lied. And that's where my double life started. My older sister had blazed the path for me, teaching me how to be a good Asian child in a strict immigrant household while simultaneously trying to be a typical American teenager. So in high school, that meant a little bit of fibbing and sneaking around in order to make room for some friends, some fun, and a secret girlfriend named Kathy, who happened to be white. When I went to college, I further diverted from the path and majored in sociology instead of the prescribed engineering. "What do you do with a BA in sociology?" my parents asked me. Well, naturally, you go to graduate school. And that's when Kathy and I moved in together. But I knew this is something that my parents wouldn't accept. So I told them a distorted version of the truth, that Kathy and I were platonic roommates. And obviously this would be so much more believable if I conjured an imaginary third roommate to move in with us. We even had props for when they came over to visit. There was a futon in the spare room, a disposable razor and toothbrush in the downstairs bathroom, and even a note on the fridge that said, "Jake, your mom called." As grad school dragged on, my parents began to realize that I might not be the most suitable spouse for any successful Vietnamese pharmacist. Mostly because I had drastically lowered my earnings potential through my poor academic decisions. So I used this opportunity to begin a slow reveal of my relationship with Kathy. Eventually, Jake moved out, and Kathy and I bought a house together, all right? And so no matter the cultural background, buying a house is a pretty serious commitment. So now my parents' disapproval took on a different form. Their son, me, was taking advantage of this poor white girl who was sitting around waiting for a proposal, right? I had to endure almost daily phone calls from them asking when we were gonna get married. My mom used a mixed metaphor about getting milk for free from a cow when I haven't bought the beef. So I had to reassure them every single time, we're happy with the way things are, and no, we don't want to get married. Now, to this day, I actually don't know if they wore me down or if it was because my biological clock was ticking, but I did know that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Kathy. So I decided that I was going to propose to her on an upcoming camping trip to Acadia National Park. So this meant I had a finite amount of time in which to acquire an engagement ring on a graduate student salary while keeping it a secret from Kathy, who managed our joint finances. I started to research engagement rings, but realized quickly that I was out of my depth. And I remembered that my parents had a connection who could acquire diamonds for cheap. You just don't ask any questions about where they came from. So I asked them to hook me up. My parents were so excited that I would finally be making an honest woman out of Kathy, and it would bring an end to the cow milk beef scenario. So I told them my plan. If they could acquire a small diamond for no more than $500, I would pay them back as soon as I could, get that loose diamond, have it set into a nice simple solitaire, and I'd be golden, right? In their euphoria, they quickly agreed to help me out. Less than 24 hours later, they call me back. "Hey, we have the ring." You mean the diamond, right? "No, the ring." They went on to tell me that they had just purchased a ring valued at $3,500 for the low, low price of $2,500. And this is why Asian kids don't share anything with their parents. I couldn't afford a $2,500 ring no matter how good the bargain. And now the engagement ring that I was going to use to propose was picked out by my parents, which didn't seem very romantic. But you see, to my parents, this made perfect sense. When my mother arrived in this country in 1972 to meet her future husband, she was already wearing a wedding band that my father's parents had purchased in Vietnam. So they were just doing what they thought was right. Now, I couldn't act like a spoiled, ungrateful son because they cashed in a favor for me and they fronted the money. So I thought, maybe it's going to be okay. My sister, who was tasked to deliver the ring to me on an upcoming trip to the East Coast, called me as soon as she was alone with the package. "I have the ring," she says, "and it's beautiful." This was followed by a really long pause. "But you have to do something about this. You cannot propose with this ring. It is not Kathy's style. It's Vietnamese bling bling." So what you need to know about my mother is that she is 4'11", but she takes up an enormous amount of space with her big personality. She is like a hip-hop artist when it comes to jewelry. You see, jewelry is a way to display your success to the world. The pieces that you wear have to be eye-catching, and they've got to have flavor. And in this case, for this ring, that big, bold flavor was fish sauce. When I lay my eyes on this ring for the first time, it looks like the Chrysler Building and a Super Bowl ring had had a baby. 29 diamonds in all. A big one surrounded by 3 tiers of smaller diamonds. Okay? It probably stood half an inch from the top of a finger. It was like a weapon. And if anybody happened to be wearing this ring, if they happened to brush their hand against the wall, a significant amount of plaster would come tumbling down. As my sister and I stare at this weapon, she offers generously, "I'll loan you $1,000, and you can buy something more simple and subdued, and we'll figure out the rest later." And in that moment, I realize that the patriarchy really does suck. Right? I am now potentially $3,500 in the hole for 2 rings that symbolize something that I'm not even sure my partner wants. And at this point, I'm running out of time before our trip, so I rely on nostalgia to guide me to a little South Asian import shop in Northampton, where back in college, Kathy had purchased a lot of ornate silver rings. But it's not the 90s anymore, and in the location where that shop used to be was now a woman-themed pagan store. I am desperate, so I venture in. Luckily, they have rings. It's a miracle. And I agonize trying to figure out which womanly pagan-y ring best says, "I love you, and I want to marry you." 90 minutes later, I come out armed, victorious, with a $15 Celtic band, just in time for our trip. The next week, on the top of a mountain, as the sun rose, I romantically popped the question, "Hey, do you want to get married?" She responded with the traditional, "Are you serious?" I went on to tell her about the epic journey I had just gone on to get this $15 ring, and I told her about the other ring. I opened the box to show her, and she was instantly blinded by all the sunrise glinting off that flavor. And she said, "Put that thing away." But here's the thing, I couldn't just put it away, right? I still had to pay for it and figure out what to do with it. With some coaxing from my sister, my parents agreed that I wouldn't have to pay for the ring. It was a gift to Kathy out of their love. It's amazing how far we've come, and I'm forever grateful for this gesture of acceptance, because I didn't have that money. Now, what Kathy and I really wanted to do was repurpose those diamonds, but that would mean ripping apart a symbol that represented a parent's love, and that felt selfish. After some months of negotiation, telling them it wasn't practical, that she would never wear it, and one last little fib that she does a lot of rock climbing, and so it was likely to get damaged, they reluctantly agreed that we could do whatever we wanted with it. In the end, we took about half of those diamonds and reset them into a 3rd engagement ring and wedding band, and tucked the remaining diamonds away out of sight, because blood diamonds are forever. Really, though, those diamonds are a lot like the rules set out in front of me by my immigrant family. In order to put an end to my double life, I had to make peace with the fact that I could never be exactly the person that my parents wanted me to be. And I had to make some tough choices about which values and lessons my parents imparted upon me that I would hold close, and which ones I would tuck away in order to be my one true self. Thank you.
December 7th, 2019. I got a text message from my mother. Romy, mañana es el Miss Universo. Tomorrow is Miss Universe. Okay. Next day, December 8th, 2 hours before the Miss Universe, another text from my mother. In 2 hours is the Miss Universe. I did what I do every year. I first rolled my eyes, and then I said, Gracias, Mami. Thanks for the reminder. So I did what I do most years, turn on the TV, watch the Miss Universe. But you may think that this is something unimportant, but what you gotta understand is that where I'm from, Venezuela, pageants, beauty queens are a big deal. We are obsessed with them. So much that we are #1 in crowns. We're only tied by the United States. We have 7 of them, 7 Miss Universe, 6 Miss World, 2 Miss Earth, and who knows what else, many more. When I first started traveling outside of Venezuela, and I would tell people that that's where I was from, usually I would get a similar response, Venezuela, the country of beautiful women. And I would often joke, of course, obviously, look at me. The thing about it is that that is a joke, because the truth is that I never really connected with that statement, because all of our beauty queens don't really look like me. They're usually tall and skinny. They are white, or as close to white as you can get being Venezuelan. You have long, straight hair. That is really important. When I was in the 4th grade, my teacher came one day announcing that our class was gonna put on a show for our end of school year performance, celebration. And she said we were gonna dance to Madonna's Holiday, which was hot at the time. And of course, when I heard that, I was like, me, I wanna be part of that. And my teacher looked around, started calling people's names, and I'm there doing this. She's ignoring me, she's done picking people. She did not select me to dance to Madonna's Holiday. I was so confused. And the next days, we did the same thing every day. At some point during the school day, those that were selected practiced their dance. So we did the same thing. We would push the desk to the sides, and those of us who were not part of the dance would sit on the edge and watch those who were part of the dance rehearse. And I remember that I wasn't really even angry. I was just sad and heartbroken that I couldn't be part of that group. One day, it hit me, and I understood why I had not been picked. Every single one of those girls that had been picked to be part of the dance were part of the popular girls. They were white, or as close to white as you can get, being Venezuelan. They had long, straight hair. None of those characteristics I associated with. And that day, I understood why I was not really valued, and I did feel less than. So fast forward to December 2019, I'm watching the Miss Universe, and I see Miss South Africa get crowned the most beautiful woman of the universe. And this beautiful, dark-skinned woman with short, natural hair. And as I'm watching this, and I can't believe it, I just couldn't hold back my tears, and I began to cry.
sitting across from her in the living room. And I'm trying to get my homework done because my teachers are the kind of teachers to give you homework on the weekend. So as I'm trying to watch the show and get my homework done, I look across the room and I see my mom crying. I'm not really that surprised because I kind of know why. I mean, hello, a woman of color, not even a woman of color, a black woman being crowned with her natural hair to be, so to speak, the most beautiful woman in the universe? That's monumental. So I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But I don't really know if I'd cry, because like my mom's done an amazing job. Like for example, whenever we see someone with their hair that's like natural in their big, beautiful afro, she's like, wow, look at that amazing, beautiful person with their amazing afro. So she's always been one to point out that kind of stuff. But it hasn't always been like this. Like when we used to live in New Mexico, I hated my hair. Now, I don't really think I hated my hair, but I wasn't fond of it. Like, for example, there weren't really any other girls of my skin tone or darker with my kind of hair, or any actually girls at all with my kind of skin tone. So I was never really exposed to it, and the girls that did have that kind of hair, or not really at all actually, it was tended to be wavy and really long, and it was easy to style. Well, easier than my hair, because my hair's kind of a big poof, but I love it still. And so, like, also Disney, they were just starting. Like, they only had The Princess and the Frog, and then they had Doc McStuffins, which if you don't know who she is, she's this little black girl with two braids, and she imagines to be a toy doctor and takes care of her toys. So those are really the only kind of things. But luckily, 2 years later, we got to move to Haiti when I was about 5 years old, and that's when I was like, wow, and I got to wake up. I was like, look at these amazing, majestic queens walking on the streets with their amazing hair. Like, oh my goodness. Look at this. This is amazing. So then about a year later, we moved to Massachusetts, Northampton. And I'm like, I want to get more involved. So me and my mom, we decided to volunteer a little bit more with Black Lives Matter. And I learned a bit of stuff. Now, fast forward, now we're in Connecticut. And December 8th, I'm in the living room, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Okay, we can move on now.
My father's strong brown hand gently cupping my face, eating raw mangoes sprinkled with salt and chili powder with my friends in India. My grandfather sitting in his lungi at the dining table with his foot up on the chair. Lying with my mother on her bed watching Hindi movies. These are some of my most cherished memories of home. I was born in Pakistan to Bangladeshi parents, but I grew up in India where my father worked. When he retired, we moved back to Bangladesh where my extended family lived. I am the youngest in a really tight-knit family, the baby, the only girl. And until I was 18, I often slept with my parents, finding comfort in that closeness. We took co-sleeping to a whole new level back then. By this point, my father had sent my two older brothers to colleges in the United States. But for some weird reason, my parents wanted me to settle down with a nice Bangladeshi boy. I wasn't having any of that. I had dreams of freedom, independence, conceivably being the South Asian Christian Amanpour. So when I was Admitted to the graduate program in journalism at Indiana University, Bloomington, my parents reluctantly let me go. I promised I'd be back in 2 years. I promised the same to my Sri Lankan boyfriend who lived in Dhaka. I'd imagined a future with him. So in 1991, I traveled to the US with my 2 suitcases, a backpack, my green Bangladesh passport tucked safely inside a cloth purse around my neck, and my grandfather's prized possession, a pair of thermal long johns. They were itchy and had the whole male crotch thing going. But they served me well that first winter in the Midwest. I was 21. Having lived in 3 countries, I imagined I was cosmopolitan enough to thrive in the West, not imagining that I would suffer from culture shock. But South Asia is very different from Indiana, beginning with the food. We didn't have the kind of dorm food you have here at UMass and Amherst College. I doused everything with Tabasco and gained the obligatory 15 pounds snacking on Little Debbie's and ice cream. I'm a Bengali, I have a sweet tooth. But I had gone from a majority brown area to a mainly white town. I didn't seek comfort in hanging out with the few South Asians I met on campus who had formed their own community. I wanted a different experience. Standing out didn't really bother me in the beginning until I realized that with my dark skin, British English, and thick Indian accent, that I was considered either exotic or suspect. And I didn't really realize what racism was until the first time a salesperson at Target refused to help me but watched me like a hawk. I soon realized that Indiana was the hotbed of Ku Klux Klan activity. Before I had time to really settle down, I got bad news from home. Nimal had died in a car accident. None of the friends I had made really understood what I was feeling. Even I didn't know what I was feeling. I just wanted to die. But I survived like most 20-year-olds do, 21-year-olds do. I partied and I drank. I wish I'd known back then that I'd had access to counseling. I also struggled with the pressures of graduate school. I wasn't used to the challenges and how they expected you to be original and ask questions here. I was accustomed to rote learning. I don't think the professors could conceive of how foreign students like me couldn't make that leap and the kind of support we needed. I also slowly found my dreams of being a reporter gradually going away. My reporting 101 professor seemed to treat me differently than he did the mainly white students. He was unsympathetic with my struggles, seemed to find my questions annoying, and couldn't seem to understand, and was disdainful of the way I questioned the bias of the Western media. But I gradually made some friends, and my best friend Jessica is still in my life. But I struggled a lot and felt adrift a lot because I really miss my parents. In those days of expensive long-distance calls, the main form of communications was letters. My strongest ally and my thesis advisor, Professor Jane Rhodes, a Black woman who seemed to understand why I wanted to focus on the way the third world is perceived in the US media. She guided me to the finish line with firmness, kindness, and good humor. After I graduated, I moved to New York where my brother Farhad lived, and eventually I moved into an apartment in the city with a roommate on the Upper East Side. I was starting to feel like I fit in more. There were more Bangladeshis there, literally at every corner. Most of the fruit vendors were Bangladeshi, and I came home with a lot of good deals. I had started working at 17 magazine, pop culture mecca. I slowly realized that I knew the difference between Britney Spears and Jessica Simpson, and which boy band heartthrob each one was dating. I had arrived, I was an insider. What could go wrong? Another phone call at midnight. My father had died. The sense of guilt intensified. My mother should not have had to deal with this alone. Like many immigrants, I struggle with the sense of loss and feeling divided and justifying the benefits of living in the US with the constant heartache. I continued to work at 17 magazine for a few more years, where I eventually became copy chief. And I was at the office on 9/11 and watched the horror unfold on TV. I remember hearing an editor saying, "It's those damn Arabs," and thinking to myself, please, please don't let them be Muslim. I managed to get a message out to friends and family before the internet went down. But all of that day, my mother thought I had died. Until that point, I hadn't really worried much about being Muslim, but now people seem stronger in their hatred. For almost 3 months, I walked 50 blocks to work because I was terrified of public transportation, because of the way I imagined that people perceived me, a brown-skinned person, a threat, one of them. I'd always had trouble re-entering the US on my passport, but now it was worse. I was always pulled aside, questioned, searched. I can still remember and feel the fear and heartbreak one time at JFK when I was interrogated past midnight. My companion in the room was an elderly Indian lady in a sari. She was lying on a bench with her ankle chained to it. "10 years ago, I became a US citizen. And although I've been in the US for almost 3 decades, I constantly wonder about where home is. Home used to be with my parents, but now I've been married for 18 years to a good man, my strongest supporter. We have built a really full life, first in New York and now in Amherst. We're raising a strong brown girl in this scary racist world, cheering at soccer games, attending school events, staying involved in local politics. John whipping up sushi or coq au vin on a Sunday evening while making collages. My horse-crazy Sophia cantering around our front yard or sitting at a table with her nose in a book. That's home to me now. I've come to realize that I'll always have a foot in 2 worlds, East and West. Often feeling like I never quite belong in either, but knowing that I can navigate both pretty well. Thank you.
Mabrika, Hahom, Seneco Kakona, Daka Romeo, Arosel Natividad Miriam, Daka Taino. Welcome, thank you, and abundant blessings. I am Romeo of my grandmothers Miriam and Natividad, and I am Taino. But I didn't grow up knowing those words, because nobody did. Taino is a revived language, strung together from bits and pieces found through historical digging and intuitive knowing. Sometimes I feel how the linguists must feel, like I am piecing myself together through fragments, through the bits and pieces that I can find wherever I can, trying to figure out who the hell I am. I was born in 1993 to a Boricua mother and a Jewish father. For those that don't know, Boricua is the indigenous Taino name of a Puerto Rican. And that's important. My parents taught me to be really proud of who I am, even though they grew up in a time when interracial marriage was still very much taboo, especially in our Jewish community. But they taught me that I come from two peoples who fought very, very hard for their right to survive. And survive we did. And I am the product of that. And I am proud. I always had my mother in my ear, especially talking about the Tainos. She knew how important it was for me to grow up knowing my roots, because I am the first generation of people who really claim Taino after years and years of assimilation. My mother taught me a lot, and I don't always know exactly how she knew what she knew. She taught me about our words, that words in both English and Spanish come from our people, like hammock and hurricane. And she taught me that we were fishermen, that we lived in relative abundance, that we were creative and we were loving. She taught me that when the Spanish came, we met them with peace, that we treated them as our relatives until they tried to enslave us. And then we resisted. And then she taught me about the wars from the Spanish and the United States. Our ancestral land of Vieques was taken by the Navy. They leaked uranium everywhere and it made us sick. My mom taught me to be very, very proud that we survived, that it was very important that we are Taino. So imagine my surprise when I was 13 years old and assigned a school project to look into my own family heritage. Of course, I was more than ecstatic to go looking up things about my island of Puerto Rico. And I took out a couple books from my school library and I opened them up, and one of the first things I saw were the words, "The Taino are extinct." Extinct. After my mom taught me so much about how hard we fought for our existence, extinct. Those words hit me like nothing else ever had. And I took the books home to my mother and I said, "Mom, I thought we are Taino." She didn't even look at the book. She just looked at me and said, "Your textbook is wrong." She didn't have to say anything more than that because I knew the subtext to what she was saying. She was telling me that the war isn't over, that we are still fighting for our right to exist. So I started spending my life collecting evidence of who I am, in little bits and pieces, trying to string myself together just like our language. And one example is when one Thanksgiving, the most genocidal holiday that there is, I happened to be sitting on the floor of my sibling's house. We were making collages together. And I happened upon a National Geographic study that was conducted about the Taino people. And this was maybe like 7 years later, and I was intrigued to find that National Geographic was actually dispelling everything that my 8th grade textbook was telling me about Puerto Ricans. In contrast, they were talking about how the Taino actually have DNA in almost 60% of Puerto Ricans. And one way that they were looking at this is they were looking at the different skulls of people who live currently and people who lived way before colonization happened. And they noticed this particular characteristic. It's called a shovel-shaped incisor, which is where the back of a tooth has a divot in it. It's kind of shaped like a shovel, and that this is something that existed only in South and North America. And what they found is that many Puerto Ricans have this distinct type of tooth. Now, as I'm reading this, I feel my tongue reaching to the back of my teeth. And I feel my own shovel-shaped incisors reaching back to me. And this characteristic of mine that I always felt was some kind of mangled deformity, I finally felt proud of. I felt my ancestors living in my mouth. But things got more complicated, as Indigenous identity often does. I moved to Washington when I was 12, and I went to college there on traditional Lummi territory, and there aren't a lot of Puerto Ricans out there, so not a lot of Tainos to connect with. But there were a lot of indigenous people. The indigenous people of the West had much more time to prepare for colonization, and they were able to keep their traditions and their cultures alive in a way that the Taino were not. And I learned very quickly that having DNA doesn't make you indigenous. And that gets really complicated in the United States, where a lot of people want to claim their indigenous ancestry but don't have access to their cultures and their traditions. And so I backed off a little bit of my own identity because I felt like I wasn't Taino enough to really know what it means to be Taino. And I spent the next couple years doing more digging, trying to find more things to put in my pocket, finding more remnants of the people that we were, finding more stories from my mother left in my body. And it wasn't until recently that I decided it would be very important for me to connect with other Taino people, for me to find out who I am. And so it was really just a couple of weeks ago that I went to my first Taino gathering with other Taino people and Taino elders. And as I was there, I felt myself longing to be taught something about what it means to be Taino. I was longing to walk away knowing something more than I knew before. And as I'm sitting there, I become surprised to know that there's nothing new there, that my mother taught me well, that the stories and the history and the music that we played with maracas, it felt familiar and it felt like home. And what I found was that even the elders are piecing together everything they can to try and prove that genocide didn't take us, and that I am standing on the shoulders of many people doing the same thing as me. At the end of the gathering, I found myself talking to one of the elders, and I was so grateful and honored to be in his presence. He was one of the first people to really start the movement of the reclamation of the Taino identity. And as we're talking, he looks at me and he says, "Why don't you try on my headdress?" And inside of me, I felt all of the doubt rushing back to me. I am not Taino enough to even touch that. So I pull away from him and I say, "Isn't that sacred?" And he looks at me with the firmness and the tenderness that only an elder can have. And he says, "You are Taino. Come here." And he wraps the headdress around my head. And in that moment, I felt all of the doubt shatter. And now, this was only a couple weeks ago, so I still have questions about who I am. But one thing I feel clear about is that my people survived a literal and a paper genocide. And I can't speak for any other indigenous community because we all have very different ways of deciding who belongs and who doesn't, who counts and who doesn't. But for us Taino, this is how we prove that colonization didn't win. And so for us, we have to claim ourselves. And for me, my people have claimed me. And I am Taino.